And after attacks on Hindu temples in Canada, Prime Minister Narendra Modi has condemned the violence, calling it a cowardly attempt to intimidate Indian Canadians as well as Indian diplomats. The Prime Minister has said such actions will not weaken India's resolve. External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar slammed Canada for giving political space to extremists. But in Vancouver, nearly 1,000 members from 36 Hindu and Sikh organizations came together to take a stand against Khalistani extremism. They passed a resolution expressing their frustration with these groups, which they argue represent only a small minority. A Canadian cop was also suspended after he was seen participating with pro-Khalistani groups that launched an attack on Hindus in Brampton. The suspended cop, identified as Harinder Sohi, was caught on camera holding a Khalistani flag as others at the protest chanted anti-India slogans. This continues to be, ladies and gentlemen, a point of concern back home. But what are the political dynamics behind it? Joining us on the broadcast is Canadian MP Kevin Vyong, who has taken a strong stand against Justin Trudeau. Thank you, Mr. Vyong, for joining us on CNN News 18. Now, given these brazen attacks on Hindu devotees and more cases emerging every day, is this a major cause of concern for the political establishment and parties beyond the Trudeau administration?
I'm immensely concerned. I think what we're seeing is a pattern of behavior of extremists being allowed to attack and persecute religious minorities. What we saw happen at a Hindu temple, unfortunately, fits a playbook that resembles what has been happening to Jewish synagogues, where pro-Hamas terror groups were attacking their religious institutions, just like now we see Khalistani extremists attacking Hindu Canadians. And I am very concerned about the seeming failure to keep Hindu Canadians, as we've seen in the Trudeau government's failure to keep Jewish Canadians safe. And I think it's immensely important that every Canadian, whether or not you're Hindu, speak up, because we have to stand together against hatred and political violence.
Right. Now, Mr. Vyong, beyond the charges of inaction against the Trudeau government, there are concerns of Khalistani influence in the Canadian police as well as the border agency. Is that also a cause for concern inside Canada?
I do know in Brampton there was a police officer who was off duty, not in uniform, but taking part in the Khalistani extremist protest. From my understanding, that police officer has since been suspended. And I think it's important now to let police be able to do that investigation. And I'm glad, though, that they acted as quickly as they did, because otherwise it calls into question the integrity of police. And that's something that, as Canadians, is so important, that we're able to trust the people who keep us safe.
And Mr. Vyong, today the Trudeau government made a statement in Parliament. Now, Canadian Minister Kamal Khera, who is also the MP from Brampton West, says there is no place for hate and division in Canada. Do you feel this is just lip service coming in from the Trudeau government?
It's just lip service. Let's be clear. Inaction is a choice. And the Trudeau government has chosen to allow hatred to fester in Canada. That started with Jewish Canadians, that started with the pro-Hamas terror rallies that took over the streets of Toronto and Canadian cities. And where was the Trudeau government there? Nowhere to be found. And then, as that hate spreads, because hate is an indiscriminate virus, and history has shown us what starts with the Jews never ends with the Jews. And now we've seen that hatred spread to Hindu Canadians. And so it is rich for the Trudeau government to stand up their minister to say, oh, there's no place for hate in Canada, when there is only hate because of them, because of their inaction, and they chose to allow it to fester, and Canadians are paying the price.
Right, but Mr. Vyong, is there brazen political patronage from the Trudeau government? Clearly, there is a lot of evidence pertaining to that. But is the political reality of Canada that Khalistanis hold political capital with the political establishment? Now, given the charges that there have been links between the Trudeau government and the Khalistani extremists and a lot of political patronage coming in from Justin Trudeau, is there a reality that no matter which party is in power, there is a political capital in backing Khalistani extremism?
I think it's important to point out that the Sikh community, like any diaspora community, is not a monolith. But Justin Trudeau seems to falsely believe that the Khalistani extremists somehow represent the 700, 800,000 Sikh Canadians that call our country home. And that is, I think, false. And that's not coming from me. That's coming from a former Sikh Canadian cabinet minister, Ujjal Dosanjh, who was a Liberal cabinet minister, who was a Liberal MP colleague of Justin Trudeau, who later went on to become Premier of British Columbia. And he has pointed the finger specifically at Justin Trudeau as being the root cause for Sikh extremism in Canada, because he has embraced this idea that Khalistanis, the fantasy that it is, somehow represents Sikh Canadians, when that is not true at all. And in fact, Mr. Dosanjh has gone on to say at most 5, maybe 7% of Sikh Canadians subscribe to the Khalistani movement. And yet Justin Trudeau falsely goes on to paint the full 800,000 Sikh Canadians as believing in this false fantasy movement, this violent movement, when in fact it is not representative of the majority. It simply is a vocal minority. But unfortunately, what this is it's a pattern of behavior from Justin Trudeau, where he looks at the loud vocal minority who are willing to intimidate, often go to lengths which will involve political violence, like the Hamas terror groups and those who support terrorists, to then somehow believe that because they're loudest, they represent everyone else, when that is patently false.
Right. Let's talk about India-Canada ties right now. Now, is Justin Trudeau now headed for the exit politically, given the polls which show that he is deeply unpopular? Moreover, do you see the nosedive in India-Canada ties, which we are seeing under Justin Trudeau, just an aberration given the inaction of Trudeau's government?
I'll start with your second question. It is true that, unfortunately, under Justin Trudeau's watch, Canada-India relations is probably the worst it's ever been. But I do take comfort in knowing that Canada and India have long-standing ties as both members of the Commonwealth. There's a huge trade relationship and obviously extensive people-to-people ties. And the relations between our two countries will survive any government. Governments come and go, but those ties will remain. And I believe that when Justin Trudeau is shown the door by Canadians, because we can all read the polls, my continued position is to, especially in advocating to Liberals, is we know you're going to lose. Why don't you lose with some dignity and do the right thing? Stand up to protect religious minorities. Stand up to protect and defend Hindu Canadians, as we should Jewish Canadians and others who have been persecuted in our country on their watch. And instead, they take a blind eye to it all. And so when Justin Trudeau is shown the door, when there's a new government, it is my sincere hope. And frankly, it's why I am speaking to you and other Indian media to let the people of India know that the Trudeau government does not represent all Canadians, because the majority of Canadians value our relationship with India. And as two democracies, we must stand together, and we will.
Kevin Vyong, thank you so much for joining us on CNN News 18 and sharing your perspective. So a lot of questions being posed against Justin Trudeau, not just from India, but also from within Canada.